let's talk about watches that have amazing wrist presence. And I know wrist presence can be a fairly subjective part of our hobby. You might think, well, Bruce is super high on that just because it's shiny, it's blingy, or it's big, or it comes from a certain brand. And fair enough, this is a fairly subjective hobby, but I'm going to show 8 different watches here in the video that I've had hands-on with or currently own that I think are truly special, that stand out, that are more than just big or blingy or from a certain brand or has, a certain specific type of history. I think a watch to truly have amazing wrist presence, it has to have a pairing of nuanced elements that really work in conjunction with each other, like size, finish, color, complication, proportion, history. I mean, you could go on, and if the watch has a great design as a whole and it incorporates some of these elements and they work with each other, you can get an execution at almost any price that is, one that you just can't forget and you can't get out of your head. And when you look at your wrist to gauge the time, you're not thinking about, hey, what time is it? You're thinking about, wow, that's a beautiful watch. I'm so glad I bought this. What a stunner. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel special. Sometimes you may even forget to gauge the time because you're just lost in your appreciation for such a work of art, a mechanical work of art that's on your wrist. So in no particular order, these are 8 different watches that I think are really worth considering. Some that I've owned, some that I plan to own, and some that I have flipped in the past and might have to revisit because I'm a crazy watch enthusiast. So let's begin here. The first one. Yes, I'm leading off with a Breitling, and I think the 42 millimeter size, the smallest size, is the best size. Now, I've owned the 44, I've tried on the 46. I think they're okay, right? You can pull those off with larger wrists and a larger frame, but the 42 is the most proportional, and I think it looks dang good. And you could argue that this almost grabs too much attention. It's almost too shiny, too much light play, too much reflection going on with the all polished finish of the case, with the polished Milanese style mesh, which I think is the very best way to experience this watch as opposed to other strap options. And then you look at the gloss ceramic bezel insert and that burst, that sunburst dial. This one I'm showing you is done in blue, and notice how the blue of the dial is slightly different in hue of the blue of the bezel. So when you get in sunlight, you notice those little nuances, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It puts a smile on your face, and you definitely notice this watch, and it has great detail work with those rhodium plated applied markers, the long hand set, the linear nature of the execution of the dial with the date at the 6 o'clock position. And then with everything being visible under one of the best cambered sapphire crystals on the market, with that anti-reflective treatment, that application that really cuts down on the haze, enhances the clarity. You can see the details of the dial to a very sharp degree, but then you also get that lovely iridescent blue sheen in certain lights that I think really works well with the blue dial, blue bezel execution. And this is one that I keep coming back to. Every time I want to make a purchase right around $5,000, I'm always thinking about this watch because, again, I did try the 44, but the 42 is the way to go. I love that Tudor movement. I love how smooth the winding action is. I love the retro design language. There isn't anything that I don't enjoy about this. And I keep coming back to it. So I'm sure at some point this will make its way into the rotation because it's definitely worthy of consideration. Now, this is the most affordable watch on the list today, and it's one that I've owned, and then I flipped, and hey, you're home? Awesome. Well, say hi to everyone watching on YouTube. You want to say hi? Hi. So actually, it's a funny story. This is my 4-year-old, and she got mad at me for selling the orange watch, didn't you? Because that was her favorite. It's easy to appreciate. Can you go upstairs and help Mom? Okay, can you close the door too? Okay, thank you so much. I love you. Okay. Dad life, and I totally love it. And excuse my crying baby upstairs. I It happens, right? Life happens. Anyways, the Seiko, that was my daughter's favorite. It was so easy to appreciate. Yes, it's large, and I think sometimes people equate wrist presence to just size, and that's an oversimplification. You can have a large watch and it be nasty and ugly and blah. I mean, any Invicta really proves that point. But the Turtle, 45 millimeters, but it's still very wearable for a wide range of wrists. Even if you have, fairly small wrists, you can pull off a Turtle. And it has that lovely retro design language, the quintessential Seiko design DNA with the crown at the 4 o'clock positions, the curves, the nature of the flow of the case, and how you have little details like the sloping aluminum bezel insert going down to the Hardlex crystal. And then, yes, you have the hilted sword and the applied marker. It's got the history, it's got the size, it's, pretty affordable. But what takes it to the next level is that pop of the orange. And Seiko is one of the few brands that consistently and very, does a very good job in working with this bright construction color, right? That's meant to almost act as a warning, like, hey, be careful, be on your guard. Things are going on here. Seiko works with orange so well. And to add the sunburst, I think just makes it even better. And you get the grain of the sunburst and you get the reflection. So it ends up being a little bit lighter and brighter than one of their flat orange executions, So this one really, this one's a special one. I bought it originally. I flipped it. I had to rebuy it. I flipped it. My 4-year-old got mad at me, so maybe I have to buy it again at some future point and keep it this time and give it to her one day for her to enjoy. Maybe if she's into massive Seiko divers in the future. Let's go to the next watch here, guys. This is an Omega. This one is the Aquaterra World Time. Now, here's something else that I've noticed with watches that have amazing presence, and that is it's hard to pull off a large watch. Again, because size doesn't equate presence. If you have a bigger palette to work with, you really have to make sure you fill that real estate to a pleasing degree and make it manageable, if that makes sense. Make it comfortable. You never want to have a watch that's cumbersome or tiresome to wear, because then it doesn't have amazing presence. And so this Aquaterra, it's larger than the standard 41.5 millimeter Aquaterra, either small seconds or center seconds on the market, but it's still, not overly large. It's still comfortable. And the way they've worked with the real estate on the dial is it's a work of art with that laser ablated titanium pattern with the different color. And even notice the applied markers, the finish, how dynamic they are, how they're shaped, and how they have some lume. So it has a bitone lume application. Really is a beauty. And if you turn the watch over, the dial is the most interesting part of the watch, in my opinion, but you turn the watch over and you take a look at the machine finished arabesque, pattern on the movement, that lovely spiral pattern and how that works well with the contrasting color, the red found in the synthetic stones, found in the inlay of the text. And this is also very beautiful to look at, although not quite as beautiful, I think, as the dial side. This one is really, really impressive. I had to include a Grand Seiko in this list. You really could drop in a number of different Grand Seikos that have outstanding or amazing presence, but this is one that I felt was exceptional in its execution. This is the White Birch. And incidentally enough, this one belongs to my father. This is one that he wears regularly alongside his Seamaster, and he really loves it. It's easy to see why. Take a look at the detail work here. Take a look at the dial, the undulation, the application of these massive, faceted, beautifully finished applied markers. And notice the handset, notice the finish work, the Soratsu polishing, and how the bracelet is far nicer than previous generations of Grand Seiko bracelets, which always left me feeling like they didn't do as great of job on the bracelet. This bracelet, it's more solid, it's more rigid. It feels more like a Swiss bracelet, but it's still comfortable and I think really nice, a step in the right direction. And then you turn the watch over and take a look at the case back and you see this lovely new high beat movement that is traditionally finished with the perlage work, with the striping, with the anglage, and it's a work of art. It really looks good, and I like the free sprung balance. I like the skeletonized rotor. I love the high beat. I love the 80 hours power reserve, and I love the variable inertia system for regulating the movement and the balance. I think it's classically beautiful, and it's classic Grand Seiko in its beauty, taking inspiration from nature. This one, this one is good. Now, the next one, I think a lot of you may disagree with me on, and that's fine. Again, this is fairly subjective. This is not a comprehensive list. These are just watches that I've noticed to be especially good. And this one is especially good, the Piaget Polo S. And I like how, it's almost oblong in its execution with, how fat the bezel is in some areas with the brushwork, how that accentuates the shape, the irregular nature of the crystal shape, and then the teak the teak texture on the dial with the sunray, how the blue, changes in sunlight, how the H-Link bracelet alternates with the brush and polish finish to really work well with this thin case. This really is elegant on wrist, very comfortable, and it really plays with the light well. The only real knock about this is you could say it's not very original in its concept. You see some Nautilus, you see some Aquanaut, you see some other watches when you look at this that are obviously more famous. But on the flip side of that, sometimes it's fun to get into a watch that is not everyone's cup of tea. Maybe it's fairly divisive. Maybe it's passed over a lot because I don't know, maybe I sound crazy here. But when a watch is super hyped up and everybody's loving on it, it's a total love fest. I don't know, it kind of loses its luster a little bit. And it's fun to get into those little niches, those little well-kept secrets of very satisfying watches that only the few put on their wrist. And I think the Piaget falls in that category. I really like this one. Now this next one, this is a mid-level watch, meaning it's not as expensive as some of the watches that I've been featuring here so far, but it's more expensive than the entry-level Seiko Turtle. This is the Aqua's Date in the lovely Honggang edition, the green. And I've got to say, this is the most unique shade of green. It's unlike any other green dialed watch on the market. And we all know green is in right now. Some brands are doing olive or drab, or they're going bright with mint. I think the Hulk is my favorite shade personally. But there's something about this hue of green. It's so unique and different. And you pair that with the way they've executed the complication, and then how cohesive this contemporary design is with the integrated bracelet and everything. And you get the varied shades of green, being dark out at the bezel, but then lightening and brightening the closer you get to the hand stack. You have a fume dial execution with the angular faceted applied markers and how they work well with the handset and how those work well with the lugs. It's just a very cohesive design that is different, unique, and beautiful. I really enjoy this one quite a bit. Oh, quite a bit. I was sad when I sent this back, but maybe it's one that I need to purchase in the future. It's really that good. Now, this is the only German watch on this video here. It's the Glashütte Original. It's the 70s. And this is one that I borrowed from a good friend of mine here in Utah. We have very similar tastes, and it is so surprising when you see it in person. Because yes, it's a pretty big watch, this square design in the 40mm size, and you get it on the bracelet and it's hefty, but it's so solid and it's finished so well. And Glashütte Original nails the details. You look at the back of the watch, the case back, and you get that subtle curve. It's so comfortable. And then you get the reflections coming off of this kind of square, but also rounded bezel and crystal. And then you get the large date, the pano date below the hand stack. And then this ruthenium dial, the sunburst dial. You get the color play, you get the graining, but you also get reflections of various hues. Like if you're in cool light, the watch is very blue. You get a natural light and you see almost some bronze and yellow, and it's, oh my goodness. It's so beautiful. And, that's not even mentioning the movement, the traditionally finished movement with the lovely Glashütte rotor, the swan neck. This is very traditional, but also retro and loud and big, but so satisfying. This is one that I feel I really need to buy, and not just buy to enjoy for, 6 months, 8 months, however long it lasts, but to buy for the long term. Because once this goes, I know I'm going to be full of regret. Like, man, I should have bought that when I had the opportunity to. It really is a good one. All right, we've got to the last entry here in this video, and it's one I'm wearing today. You might have guessed it already, but it is the Zenith Defy Classic 41 open work dial, grade 5 titanium on the H-Link bracelet. I think the bracelet takes it to the next level. It's really one of the nicest, if not the nicest bracelet that you can get sub, the retail price is almost $8,000, but it sells more for about $5,000 or $6,000. Whew, the bracelet is good. And it has a dominant brush finish. And Zenith just does select areas in high polish, and it grabs light. This, when I do a wrist roll, it's mesmerizingly beautiful. It is so dang good, but it's also light, again, because it's titanium. And then this specific dial execution, being open work, takes it to the next level. It has such a complexity to it, but it's also not overly busy just for the sake of being busy. There's layers to this. And oh, it's so cool. Notice how the date, you look at this and you don't think it has a date because the date wheel is skeletonized, but then it's highlighted down at the bottom portion of the dial at the 6 o'clock. And then you have these cantilever applied markers. And then you have a bitone lume application. So in low light, you know which is, the bottom of the dial because the lume is a little bit different of a color. I think that's lovely attention to detail, not to mention the tech involved here with the silicon escapement, the architecture done in the brand logo. This one is so dang good. And I've heard people say, Bruce, it's beautiful. It's awesome. Yes, I love it, but I could never read it. I'm telling you guys, excuse me, I just knocked the microphone. I'm telling you guys, you look at this and after 5 seconds, it becomes a complete non-starter because it's surprisingly legible for such a dynamic watch. It really is easy to read at a glance, and I've not had any issues. So that concludes my 8 entries here. And I've thought of some other watches that I might need to give screen time to in a follow-up video. So let me know if you have interest in that. And let me know what you think is, the most visually dynamic, the watch with the best presence, the amazing presence that I featured today. And also let me know what watch you've had experience with that has just been unforgettable and gives you that excitement as you have it on wrist. And when you look at your wrist to gauge the time, I'm interested. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time.